It's a relatively strong paper, but I want to move quickly because everyone in my family keeps getting sick. And so my saint of a wife with fever over 100 right now is watching both of my kids. So I'm going to go as quickly as we can through this one. So the quick checklist that you've seen me do a bunch, we've got last name and page number up here. This is a correct MLA heading. This should be the due date, but that's fine. This is where the title should be. It's centered. All the fonts are the same. That's nice. We scroll down. There's no works cited page, so we do need to see a works cited page. We've talked about in some of the other videos how to insert that in there. There do appear to be some in-text citations, but they look to be copy and pasted, probably from the annotated bibliography. And we'll talk a little bit in just a second about why I can tell that. But let's go ahead and read this title and this first paragraph. How exercise and a proper diet affects our mental and or emotional health. Okay. This title will have to change. We'll talk about that once we've read the first paragraph, though. To say I was obese at the end of my high school football career is a bit of an understatement. I was 5 feet and 10 inches tall, but weighed 260 pounds. During that time, I was not the most confident person you would ever meet. I dealt with small depression stages, my self-esteem was not the highest, and my energy levels were just overall low. On November 27th, 2022, I decided I was going to change how my body looked by losing weight. I made the switch to a cleaner diet while simultaneously increasing the amount of time I spent exercising each week. As a result, I not only lost 90 pounds, but also experienced a tremendous change in my cognitive/emotional health. The occurrence of my depression stages decreased drastically, I became more confident in my appearance, and I had more positive energy to exert throughout my day. I now not only look like, but also feel like a completely different person than I once was. When achieving the correct amount of exercise per week is mixed with a nutritious diet, cognitive/emotional health is improved. Okay, so great. This paper has a pretty clear thesis statement right here at the end. We're going to end up deleting it, but we'll have to go through the whole thing before we explain why. There's one kind of glaring issue with this date. I'm assuming this was supposed to be 2021, because if it's 2022, then this person lost 90 pounds in like a week, which is, unless you're losing a limb, difficult to do. And so want to make sure that date is correct. But let's go ahead and talk about the issues I have with the title, and then we'll go through the rest of this first paragraph. So exercise and a proper diet, or how exercise and a proper diet, good, affects. Now, a lot of people are going to say affect here, but this is actually the correct effect, because effect, while usually a noun, can sometimes be a verb when it means to bring about a change in, right? So kudos for getting that tricky one, right? Our mental and or emotional health. So this is where we have an issue. One, I would say that emotional health, and I'm not a mental health expert, so I could be wrong about this, but emotional health falls into the larger category of mental health. And there's also this /or that we don't need, right? We can get rid of this entirely, because if something's going to affect our mental and emotional health, there's not a scenario where it's going to do one or the other, right? And I think that based on the general thrust of the paper, we can probably just do this to sort of shorten our title. So yeah. And two, we might even just say sorry, my cat clawed me. Stop, Momo. How physical health affects our mental health. But this is where we're eliminating the claim. So I guess that's pretty good. Yeah, we'll leave that there. Okay. So there's a little verbal sort of or writing tick that you see at the beginning of these first few sentences, where instead of saying something was bad, it's not good, right? It's a kind of negative way of stating it. And I don't mean negative like negative feeling. I mean negative as in like using not or something like that. And so we do it a couple of times. We say that to say I was obese was a bit of an understatement, right? I was not the most confident person. My self-esteem was not the highest, right? And so what we can do is we can go through and make these positive. And in making them positive, we're going to, first of all, get rid of that kind of, frankly, kind of awkward repetition. But second of all, we're going to be able to save a bunch of words. Okay, to say I was obese at the end of my high school football career is a bit of an understatement. That's fine. We can leave that. It's a sort of humorous deflection of something that's uncomfortable to talk about, right? I was 5 feet and 10 inches tall, but weighed 260 pounds. So I don't actually know how MLA would say to do height. To me, this looks more normal. If I can remember the keyboard shortcuts I have for, I don't do this very often. Got it. I don't know. That may not be how MLA wants it done, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, so we can get rid of during that time because we know we're telling a narrative about this time period, right? And we're sticking with the same tense, so we can just say I was not the most confident person. We can do 2 of those probably. I think that's fine. We can have 2 of the negatives there. That's fine. This relative clause we can get rid of if we want to. We don't have to get rid of that. It's not necessary. But in the interest of saving words, which this assignment is all about, we can. Okay. I also have an issue here. I dealt with small depression stages. My self-esteem was not the highest and my energy levels were all low. This just sounds to me like depression. And I don't mean that in a dismissive way like, oh, it's only depression. That's not what I mean. I mean, we don't want to just refer to it, I guess, as small depression stages. Depression looks different to a lot of different people, and depression looks different. It manifests in a lot of different ways. It doesn't just mean you have a case of the SADS or, a case of the Mondays, right? It's not just like womping your way through life. There's like, if you have stuff that like, I used to enjoy this, but now I get no joy out of it whatsoever. I lie in bed at night exhausted and can't sleep. I have incredibly low energy, which we're talking about right over here. My motivation is completely gone. I get no satisfaction when I am successful, and right, this depression looks different to a lot of different people. Sometimes it is, a sort of chronic sadness, a general malaise, right, and that's fine. But what we want to do is we want to kind of give it the weight here that it deserves. And so this kind of abstract way of speaking about it is pretty stereotypical for how all men tend to talk about mental health, because up until recently, and there's still a bunch of controversy about it, men's mental health has been just sort of, you don't talk about it, right? There's 2 sort of things you have. You either have shell shock, or you're fine. That's it. And so obviously the mental lives of both men and women are enormously complex, and of humans are enormously complex. So let's give this the weight that it needs. So we can just say I was depressed. My self-esteem was low, or had low self-esteem if we want. Oops. Can we do it? Sorry, I'm relearning some of my hotkeys. Which one is it? I'm really struggling here. No. This is so embarrassing. There, finally. Wow. I don't have time to go edit that out, but that is terribly embarrassing. Okay, second keyboard Alt plus G is dash. And my energy levels were low and had low energy. We can say lethargic too if we want to shake it up a little bit, right? But we can just be pretty direct about it, and I think that's fine. I decided I was going to change how my body looked by losing weight. We can just say 2 here. Well, okay, this is a little awkward, right? Because we're talking about, the paper's about mental health, right? And this is not incorrect to say, hey, I was feeling depressed and overweight, and I decided I was going to change how my body looked by losing weight. But that's about, that's self-esteem related and body image related and physical, but it doesn't have anything to do with mental health. And I think my guess would be that basically the discovery here was I was not feeling very good about myself. I assumed that it was a body image thing, and so I started taking care of my body, but the process of taking care of my body improved my mental health, right? That said, we don't know any of that for sure yet, and so this reads a little awkwardly. I'm not going to change it right now. We're not going to change it right now, but that would be something that I would probably flag. I would just do like one of these, and so I knew I needed to flag it or to come check it before I submitted the paper, because I want to make sure this matches with what we're saying. I made the switch to a cleaner diet while simultaneously increasing the amount of time I spent exercising each week. Okay, this is the other, I would say, consistent issue in this paper that needs to be worked on. So there's this great scholar, David Bartholomew, who wrote an essay called Inventing the University. And what he's talking about is that basically every time a student sits down to write a paper, to a degree, it's kind of it's a farce, right? Like, you have to pretend to be an expert, and you're writing to somebody who is a college professor who reads experts, right? And you're a student, and so obviously there's a degree of like, I don't know the right word for it. You're pretending, right? And of course, through various iterations of pretending, eventually, you stop pretending and you just become a scholar. That's kind of how the process works, right? When you are just starting out, like this person played football, right? When you start playing football, you are really pretending to be a football player because you're doing like pee-wee, you're a little kid, you don't know the rules. When you tackle somebody, you're more likely to fall over than they are. You're not really a football player in the way that we think of a professional, but you watch the pros and you pretend to be the pros, right? And so there's not an acknowledgement in academia as much, except with, Bartholomew and some other scholars, that's what students are doing when they write. And so this is a classic example of a sentence that does that. It's trying to sound like an academic sentence, right? We're not saying, I ate cleaner and exercised more, which is how we'd probably talk about it if we were just talking to somebody. We say, I made the switch to a cleaner diet while simultaneously increasing the amount of time I spent exercising each week, right? And this kind of, it's frequently referred to as academese, and it's one of the things that makes academic writing difficult to read and really bad. And then people end up copying it because that's what they assume, that this is how smart people are supposed to write. And so it is very true that a lot of academic writing kind of sounds like this, but it's also true that a lot of academic writing is not good writing. It's simply bad writing because the academics who are writing these papers aren't writers. They're not, that's not what they studied, right? They studied chemical engineering or something else, and so they're terrible writers. They're, you have as much writing experience as they do at the end of your freshman or first year cycle of writing, right? When you're done with that, you've taken all the composition courses that they've taken, and they're imitating the experts that came before them. And there are reasons, especially when you're doing a study, to sound that way, right? There's a pretty formulaic process that you have to go through, and it ends up making some of the writing sort of stilted, but we don't want to imitate that if we don't have to, and we don't. And so, at least in this case, right, we're in a narrative mode, and so we can be consistent with that. So instead of saying made the switch, we can just say I switched to a cleaner diet and exercised more each week. We save ourselves a bunch of words, and it sounds certainly more human. We know that this is going to be a result of that because it's proximal cause. I not only lost 90 pounds, but also experienced a tremendous change in my, and these two, this is interesting because cognitive/emotional, we're saying, the same thing that we saw earlier in the title is showing up here again. And I would have to look at the whole paper first to know, but I think we really should pick one unless we're going to say, because there is research that shows that your improved cognition from exercising and taking care of your body and making sure you get enough sleep and, treating yourself like, a person who deserves nice things, right? That also has huge impact on your cognitive ability. I'll have to look up the study to make sure that I'm actually getting it right, and this was actually a study that's done and not an urban legend. So peak source credibility here. A study done with college students where they had some college students go in to do a math test while wearing a lab coat that they gave them, and others put on a hard hat. And the lab coats did better than the hard hats, not because these students were any smarter or any better, right? It was just a random sampling of students who were all about the same level academically and intellectually, but the self-perception of people, the self-image of people who are wearing smart people clothes, I'm doing air quote here, air quotes, versus not smart people hard hat, changed how they performed. And so there's a bunch of issues with that are interesting. One is, why do we assume hard hat people aren't smart? I don't know if I don't shoot very many videos because I'm often have been dealing with toddler clothes, so I don't have the camera on. But behind me, there's a hard hat for my grandfather who worked in a steel mill for 40 years and who's very, very intelligent. Not a traditional intelligence, certainly, because he didn't have the opportunities to sort of develop that side of himself. but he was observant and financially just very, very literate without very much. He was a very intelligent man. And then I also, as a function of working in academia, I've known a bunch of dumb people who wear lab coats. And that's not to say that lab coat people are worse than hard hat people or vice versa. It is to say that we both have a bias, but also we can utilize that bias in order to perform better. So for you, when you're writing a paper or going in to take your exams, if you have an idea in your head of what a smart person looks like, then dress that way. And that can help you. So there is such a thing as cognitive health. And I think that what I'm talking about when I talk about your ability to perform mentally because you're taking care of yourself, that is an aspect of overall mental health, yes. And there's something about emotional health as much, we understand what that is, right? You're experiencing a healthy range of emotions. You're sad when you're supposed to be sad. You're happy when you're supposed to be happy. None of these things lasts in a crazy amount of time. You're not seeking out, meth to handle your problems. Right. So cognitive/emotional health is weird to me because they're not the same. But I also don't think that I've seen, at least in the citations that I've looked at, anything about cognitive health. And I think that we might just have an easier time saying mental health. Okay. The occurrence of my depression stages decreased drastically. This is that same Academese, right? And it's frankly, it's pretty good Academese, right? This is the kind of thing you would read, but I'm trying to push you away from that into being a little bit more direct. So instead of saying the occurrence of my depression stages decreased drastically, we can just say, I was less depressed. I became more confident and I had more positive energy. And we don't need to exert throughout my day because what else are you going to do with energy, right? I now not only look like now. No, we need to do it the other way. Look like, but also feel like a completely different person than I was. This we're going to delete though, and the reason we're going to delete this last sentence, we have a cognitive emotional health again. The reason we're deleting this last sentence is not because it's necessarily a bad sentence, and it's not because it's not a clear thesis. It is all of those things. But this claim was completely articulated by the narrative, and so it's redundant, right? And so we can get rid of it, and nobody's going to be confused about what this paper's about, right? Nobody's going to wonder what it's about. We're still very clear on it. Okay, that's all we're going to do right now because I'm going to go help my wife, but I'll pull up another paper and we'll keep going through it. Hopefully I'll get it up online for you guys soon. And I think I'm also going to I'm going to check with my boss, but I think I'm going to give you a little bit more time to finish this out just because the end of the semester kind of snuck up on us. So thank you very much and talk to you soon.